After watching Spider-Man, it took me a couple of days to find a little bit of free time to watch another movie that I absolutely wanted to watch. And that is none other than Mortal Engines, the latest movie that was produced by Peter Jackson, but the director is this guy. I think he was a storyboard artist. Let me see the name here because I usually forget names. Christian Rivers. Yep, I went to see that, and I try to avoid watching reviews to at least get my own opinion on what did I expect about this movie. Well, honestly, a trick to try to enjoy a movie is to try to keep your expectations kind of low. And while watching Mortal Engines, I have to say that I have mixed feelings out of it. In one hand, I kind of enjoy the movie as kind of like a popcorn flick of a movie, but at the same time, I can see why is having a not mediocre reviews, not bad reviews, but let's say to at least on kind terms, average reviews. It's not doing kind of well in the box office according to what I saw in the news. But personally, I think that it's because it's trying to compete into something bigger, which is none other than Spider-Man. But in this case, let's not talk about that. I'm just here to talk about Mortal Engines and what do I think about this movie? Well, here's what I can take from this movie. If you are a little bit of a novice on watching movies, or you're new onto movies, and you haven't seen plots like that, or you're forgiving in these kind of plots, you're gonna be fine. But still, if you put a little bit of some common mind or some thought into it, you're gonna see that lots of Swiss cheese holes that kind of damages the movie from being perfect. Well, not perfect, but very, very good. But at least in my opinion, I'll say this. I'd rather watch this movie more than Valerian. I think that from movies that do this kind of young teenage or based on books films, this is probably one of the better ones compared to others. But that's not saying much. That's just my my initial review before I start out doing my long talk about this film. Well, technically, what's Mortal Engines is about? Well, it's technically a fantastic post-apocalyptic film in which, well, there was a 24-hour war that desolated almost all of humanity. Everything is kind of, well, let's say half Mad Max world where everything is barren, but not quite barren. Some trees still survive, but apparently cities, towns, and all over the place, they went back into that steampunk era, and they become mechanized towns that they let's say that they turn themselves into tanks, and small towns that run around, they just go gather supplies, they gather what they can, but there are other big cities like London in this case, because it's technically a little bit of a British film. They go around, they look for little cities, and they eat them up. Let's say that, probably you might say that they turn into monsters, but no, let's say that it's just a big city that captures a little city and they incorporate it on their own, taking the people and the resources over there. And that's just the basics of this plot. But now I have to talk about the major plot of this movie, what the story in it is about. So basically, the movie stars this I think this is a young adult woman named Hera who enters London. London is kind of like this steampunkish proper who that kind of recovers grass all over, and she tries to kill the leader of London, who is this guy named Thaddeus Valentine, played by Hugo Weaving. because, well, apparently she has a vendetta, but the vendetta fails because she was thwarted by technically our other main character, who is a guy named Tom. Sorry. Sorry about that. Kind of cute, isn't it? So let's say that when the two meet each other, they're both drop off from London, and they kind of figure out that Hugo Weaving has this plan let's say take over the world by trying to find out the scraps of a super weapon that is the one that is responsible to destroy all the planet, because he just wants to conquer everything. And unfortunately, Tom was kind of like this archaeologist researcher of old scrap. And well, technically, the long story short, they try to bond with each other. They go through shenanigans that they have to deal with, let's say, South Yards, what I think it was called. We technically are like redneck people who take people for slavery. They join this this resistance group who tries to defeat London. And apparently they have the girl named Hera. She's the key to defeat the place, because her mother was an archaeologist, something like that. And also she's been chased by this mechanized guy who he's called a Resurrected, who is, let's say that is a robot, a cyborg robot voiced by Stephen Lang, who chases her like the freaking Terminator. And if I continue a little bit more about this movie, well, I could say that it could be spoilerish, but if you see many movies like that, you're gonna see where it's going. So I will a little bit cut the chase and talk little by little some of the elements that I like, and a little bit about the things that I dislike. First of all, let's say that the acting is okay, although this is kind of bland. I've seen worse things in a movie like that. In movies like that, come to think of it, I think this movie is actually more entertaining than The Darkest Minds that they could give us. But nothing very spectacular. The only actor who actually does very, very well is actually Hugo Weaving, because he kind of enjoys being the villain in this one. And the character Stephen Lang, the cyborg, he actually has he has something very interesting with it. But well, when you think about this character, you can see the biggest problem with this movie, and that is that it promised a lot of things between characters, but they're just there. They don't give you enough time to kind of legitimately care, especially with the main character, because the main character, they try to shoehorn in a romance between the characters of Hera and Hester. Sorry, Hera was the name of the actress. Hera Hilmar. Hera Hilmar played the character of Hester, and the character of Tom is played by Robert Sheehan. Yeah, I got IMDb there. The thing is that they have this romance, but sometimes you have to stand out a little bit of some corny lines here and there. The romance kind of feels a little bit forced in, and you kind of feel like they don't have chemistry. And in a way, I think that, yes, there is no chemistry between characters, but at least you can tell that they're trying. At least they're trying to build up a chemistry with the character. They tried a little bit better than the Valerian. Valerian, for probably forever, I'm gonna put it as the best example of an unchemical romance. So maybe that's the reason why I wasn't so phased between the relationship of the characters. But I do have to agree that there are some characters that they don't do that. They kind of feel like they're gonna do something very big, but sometimes they don't. It feels like they don't. It feels a little bit pretty basic. It gives you at least at least enough material to give you at least a story, but not so much emotion. But at least it gives a little bit of something. Maybe the Stephen Lang character, the cyborg, was the only closest one to give you some great moment of emotion. And honestly, I felt like when the character just gets out of the movie, it's the closest thing that I actually have an emotion. Oh, and speaking of which, there is also one character that I'm not gonna say, but let's say that this character feels very important, but he just drops out of the movie. He just disappears. Speaking of characters, correct me if I'm wrong, but why do I get the feeling that the blonde girl who is the daughter of their villain felt that in the only few minutes that she was with Tom, the main character, the girl was named Catherine, I think. Why do I think that they had a better chemistry than he had with our main lead, Hester? I don't know. And speaking of which, here's a little bit of a nitpick on the makeup of Hester. She's supposed to have this scar, like she's kind of like one step closer to become the Kuchisake Onna, or the slit throat woman from the Japanese mythology. But I find that saying that the scar is doesn't feel too ugly. But I'll give it this at least. It is nasty. It is a nasty gash. I only think that a little bit statistically could have been a little bit more, let's say, more scarred. I haven't read the book, but I kind of begin to imagine that the scars that he has on the book is much worse than the movie kind of wanted to push off. That's technically a little bit of a nitpick. And let's talk a little bit about the world, because the world is, I think that probably this movie is much worth watching in the big screen just because of the special effects, because the land, the world, everything is magnificent. I really like how the world looks. This steampunk world that maybe some things make no sense. For example, you might be wondering why they talk about fuel and everything when they just they just move around with these things, and why this guy wants more power and what. And something like that. You can't deny that there was a lot of thought on building this world as fantasy steampunk, for that matter. And even if we're considering that this is a movie that it happened in a world that everyone regrets into that time period of Victorian era, it's something that I just kind of slip it, but when you overthink it, you might think that, why people are kind of even overjoyed when they find out a toaster. Oh, but there is a moment which I don't know, it gave me like a cringy chuckle out of it, and I just want to punch that Universal for shoehorn in this one. Actually, there are two things that I want to get to that scene from the beginning. Because in the beginning, our main character, Tom, he kind of works at the museum. And in that museum, you can see some of those gadgets that we found nowadays. And I gotta admit, I swear that I found a Nintendo Switch in one of the windows. But the biggest punch on the face is when one of the guy who I think he was kind of like working at the relic. He just tried there were two statues, and they were toppling because there was a battle outside, and he's like, no, we have to save these gods from the past. And guess what statues are of? These statues are of the minions. The Despicable Me minions. God! Fuck Illumination! Sorry, I'm still dreading that we're gonna get a sequel to Secret Life of Pets when I hated that movie. But I have to watch it. I have to watch it, and you'll see when it gets there. Okay, leaving that bullshit aside. Like I said, the world. I like the world building. The climax of the film. It feels a little bit, you know, taking the pieces of kind of like a Star Wars thing, and they put some convenient danger, convenient plots that doesn't contribute too much on the basis of the story. Oh, and speaking of which, now that I remember, there's not only one guy who is supposed to be an engineer in London that disappears from the movie. Another guy that disappears from the movie is apparently the typical asshole superior guy who is so smug, who is kind of like this Sap Brannigan guy who apparently has a crush on Tom's best friend, the daughter of the Mr. Valentine, the Hugo Weaving character, and he's just there to say, "Hey, I found the secret stash of this super weapon that this guy Tom was recollecting," and then he also disappears from the movie. You see, two characters disappear from this movie, and they tried. I know that they tried to give us some reason to care. Also, there's this character who is kind of like their leader of that resistance group. She was a little bit close to become a character, although we wish we could have seen her more about her backstory and her relationship with the Hester character's mother. And and typical Star Wars fashion, they have this "I'm your father" thing. I'm not gonna go too much into details, but nevertheless, you from the parts that I just talked, you can see that the movie tries, and I'm kind of forgiving on this movie. This is probably one of those films that maybe it has a chance to become a cult following. I took a pic on Wikipedia about the book, and it shows that it is just one chapter from the book, and it ends up differently. It goes into different direction, and you know what? I can probably applaud them for that, to take some creative liberties. Not the best. It doesn't make me angry. But at the end of the day, I actually was just let my mind out and had a nice weekend. I just enjoyed the film from what it is. I didn't. The best way to enjoy this movie is to have low expectations. Don't expect too much. The cliches are there. The fallacies are there. But nice try. Just nice try. I'm not gonna go too harsh on this movie, and I really think that I should shut up right now and say that Mortal Engines, well, it's kind of like a rental. Watch it on the big screen when you feel like taking a ride on watching good CGI effects on the big screen. But I'm not gonna promise any much. But come to think of it, I was actually thinking that if they could have further put the creativity a little bit more. I'm wondering, why didn't they go all out and we see a tank version of the United States? But now that I think of it, that would be kind of scary.